to talk to you this morning from the heart about a complicated and painful subject that I'm really wrestling with. This is not academic, this is not intellectual, this is not up here, it's from my heart. And I have these questions. I don't have the answers. I don't have answers that are particularly satisfying for me. But I have questions that keep me up at night, and I have questions that particularly kept cheering me up the end of our trip to Israel. And it leaves us, and it leaves me, with unfinished business. The general subject is what I call asymmetry. Put aside war, put aside the current matzav. Even in peace, we know that there's an asymmetry between American Jews and Israeli Jews in terms of loving and supporting Eretz Israel. We know there's an asymmetry because our 18-year-olds go off to college and they get to read the great classics and study STEM and learn and grow on leafy college campuses in our country. And Israeli 18-year-olds go off to serve in the army. And it's not just that, but it's miluim as well. It's military duty. Sheila and I were having breakfast with Chani and Alon. Chani is our niece, Ariel and Tikuri's youngest. She and Alon got married in December 2019. It was our last trip to Israel before this current one. And I said to Chani and Alon, this summer, please God, the war should be over, the missiles should be stopped, and hopefully a reset will be able to take place between Israeli Arabs and Israeli Jews. And you're already after COVID. What are you going to do with your summer? And without skipping a beat, they said miluim. Elon is going to miluim for all of July, and he typically spends much of his miluim in Jenin, which is a tough area in, the West Bank. And so he leaves his wife, and he leaves his life, and does that. And we don't have. So in general, there's the issue of asymmetry. But then I was thinking in particular of asymmetry during a time of war. As I shared just at the end of services, if you want to take a walk this afternoon, you can do so. And I'm going to take a walk, as I always do, to BC. I love going to BC and seeing BC and walking up the steps of BC. And there's not a cloud in the sky. And I'm going to be thinking about the fact that most of Israel cannot take that walk. How do we think about that? And then I was thinking about the trip back home, and I shared last night American basketball players who were leaving because they didn't sign up for war, they didn't sign up for missiles, they didn't sign up for sirens at night. They signed up to play basketball for Beersheba on other teams. So I totally get that they left and are back home now in New York and Florida. So the question that I wanted to think with you out loud today about is, what do we do about the fact of asymmetry? I shared that the Black basketball players who were on our flight, they didn't sign up for war, and they didn't sign up for bombs, and they didn't sign up to have to run to a safe room. So I understand that they're back in America instead of playing basketball for Beersheba. But I was left with the question, I did sign up to love our beloved Eretz Israel. And when I got back home to Newton, I felt this tremendous relief and peace that here I am in Newton, and then also tremendous guilt that here I am in Newton. And I wanted to just kind of surface this issue of that asymmetry, that they're on the front lines and we are safe and secure here. And I wanted to just share a story with you that was very unsettling and very painful. And I wanted to preview the story by just saying that it evokes two feelings that I'm very unaccustomed to, and two feelings that I think in the 25 years I've been at the temple, I've never really talked about, and those are guilt and shame. And I felt both of these feelings last weekend. So basically, the story is, simply put, as I had shared in some of the letters from Jerusalem, that our nephew Yeshayahu was supposed to get married Wednesday night, May 12th. The wedding did not take place because of all the bombs falling, and he's currently in Miluim, and his wedding is going to be rescheduled. But the family, in true Israeli spirit, decided that they're going to live and not let the terrorists win, and they're going to do the weekend that they were going to have, a Sheva Brachot weekend, without Sheva Brachot, up north, about an hour and 45 minutes from Jerusalem. And we were supposed to be going there to be with the family. And I just had a bunch of misgivings about this. Number one, as you all know, I mean, you can read this in the paper, you know this, there's a record number of missiles that are falling on Israel, both more missiles than fell in the previous Gaza wars, and also they are farther, they have greater range. And a lot of the news about the war is, oh my God, Hamas has been able to muster such an arsenal, both quantity and quality, far range, scary, just terrifying amounts of arms that have been falling. And in addition, you also know about the civil war, unrest, pick your noun, that's happening, of real violence taking place between Arabs and Jews in Israeli cities. Lod and Akko have gotten all of the press, but that's not the only place where violence is breaking out between Jews and Arabs. So I was thinking about, do we really want to drive and leave Jerusalem Thursday night and drive an hour and 45 minutes on roads that we've never been on, when unprecedented number of bombs are falling on Israel, and when violence is literally breaking out in the streets of mixed neighborhoods? So I was really wrestling with this conundrum. And then I found out Thursday night about the story that I had shared in one of the letters from Jerusalem, that on the Wednesday night of what would have been the wedding, which was instead a much quieter affair at Adi, the bride's parents, in Haifa, that Yeshayahu's brother and sister-in-law, Netanel and Lorene, and their two children, Yarden and Ophir. I shared this in a letter, but basically they had literally the ride home from hell. Literally the ride home from hell. That on the way home, number one, the usual roads were blocked off because there was violence and stone throwing, and it was not safe for Jews to drive these roads. And so they had to take detour roads, and it was dark and it was unfamiliar, and it's very unsettling that Arab villages and Arab gangs are in open revolt, and that your life, if you're a Jew, is endangered. And as they were driving, they were hearing sirens, and they could see the glare of bombs falling. And they had a 6 and 3-year-old, and they finally got home after 3 hours of this ride. And Lorene, Netanel's wife, said, "We're done. We're not going to this weekend. We're not getting in a car while this war is taking place." So when Shira and I were talking about this in our hotel room, I said to Shira, I don't want to go on this weekend. I don't want to go. I don't want to brave the roads, etc. I don't want the missiles. I don't want Arab violence. I don't want to go. I don't feel safe going. And even as I said that, I felt the deep guilt that, my other Israeli family is going. They're going to be in their car. They're going to be taking those roads. They're going to be braving the risks. They're not going to be deterred. Why is my blood any redder. And I realized it's not redder, it's just wimpier. And I just felt two conflicting feelings. Number one, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And number two, who am I, who are we not to go if they're going? So Sheila and I were up talking about this like 1 o'clock in the morning, Thursday night, Friday morning. And we're supposed to be going in a few hours on Friday. And literally I did a Fiddlers on the Roof, Tevye on the one hand, on the other hand, literally. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I said, on the one hand, if we were to get struck by missiles, or if we were to get really badly injured by an Arab gang, both of which were happening, the shul would be fine. You know, we have a great clergy team, and the shul would be fine on the one hand. But on the other hand, my kids would not be fine. You know, I have 4 children, Ned and Davide and Sam and Jordana, and they still need us. And they need and deserve parents, and they're stakeholders in this conversation. And on the third hand, aside from the shul, which would be fine, and my kids that would not be fine, I don't want to take this risk. I don't want to take this risk for this weekend. So we called. We needed a rabbi, so I called Michelle at 1 in the morning, and Sheila and I were on the phone with her for half an hour. And you know, Michelle was as helpful and insightful and incisive as you would all expect. And she asked one question that kind of really clarified it for me, which was, she said, given how my kids feel, and they're very concerned. I mean, I was getting many texts and emails from them every day, calls. If you go, are you going to tell your kids? And that was a very astute question, because when Sheila and I were thinking of going, notwithstanding my fears, reservations, we thought, what do we do with the kids? And the answer was, we won't tell them. We're just not going to tell them. And then Michelle asked, is that consistent with how I generally try to live? And I try to live my life with transparency and with integrity. And then I thought to myself, withholding my concerns from my kids, who are the people that Sheila and I love most in the world, didn't feel right. So in the end, it was like 2:30 in the morning. We finally made the decision. We're not going to go, even though we know that all the other Israeli family, but Netanel and Lorene, are going to go. They're going to take risks. We're not going to take risks. And so we felt relief and also guilt and also shame. So the next morning we told Ari, Shira's brother, that we're not going. And that did not go well. It was not a happy conversation. And we've got family drama and damage to repair from. So this is not a sermon, this is a conversation. I want to pause here in the narrative to have a conversation with you about your version of this challenge of asymmetry. That is to say, if you have loved ones in Israel, let's say your parents live in Israel, let's say your sibling lives in Israel, let's say you have nieces and nephews in Israel, let's say you have family members who are in Sahel, and here you are in 02458 or 02459. How do you process this challenge of asymmetry? That's my first question. And this is a question. So I'd love your thoughts on it, and would love to invite you to share your thoughts on it. If you feel this version of asymmetry, you're safe and healthy and happy and ensconced in glorious New England, and people you love are not. They're on the front lines. How do you deal with that? It is my problem, but it is our problem. How do you deal with that? And I would love, so I'm going to I see Steve Thompson. So Steve, if you could actually send your questions, thoughts, comments to Katelyn in the chat, and she'll let me know. But in the meantime, also Steve was kind enough to send me this. So Steve Thompson, I would love your voice on it, and I would love how other people on this call have been wrestling with this asymmetry problem. Steve.
First of all, thank you, Wes, for sharing that, your feelings and your situation. I experienced the same.
Can you unmute and share? Or Katelyn, if you can unmute Steve Thompson and so that he can share.
Can you hear me now?
And Michelle, if you can help Katelyn help me do this. He's unmuted, so I'm not able to hear you.
We can hear him, Wes. We can all hear him.
Okay, great. So now, great, Steve. Sorry about that. We've got some technical difficulties. I think we're okay now. If you can offer your words, Steve.
So in 2001, when Rose and I were in Israel, we were there for her cousin's wedding, and we were there in August of 2001, and we had just and we were in Jerusalem, and we had just come out of the internet cafe after informing our kids, our family members, that we arrived safely and that all was good. And so we started to walk out of the cafe and up Jaffa Street, and Rose forgot her sun hat, went back in, and the next thing I know, I turn around, there was a bomb, an explosion, and at that time, that's when suicide bombers were going on buses. I saw a bus swerve, but it wasn't that, and the rest is obvious. It was a smoke, and it was terrible the whole time. And we called her cousin. He said, don't take a bus, take a cab back to your place. And we did go to the wedding, but there were two more suicide bombings that took place, one in Haifa and then one in another place. And finally we looked at each other and we said, I don't think we should stay. And we felt that we had to tell the family we were there for the wedding, but we felt we couldn't stay any longer. We didn't stay for Sheva Brachot, and we came back to the United States. And on our flight home, when we had agonized, but we just felt that this was, again, like you, we owed it to our families and our children specifically, who were much younger at the time, to come home and to come home safely. We had to deal with the family dynamics, specifically from Rose's side of the family. And they were angry, they felt deserted, they felt hurt, and we felt the shame, many of the feelings that you and Sheila were experiencing. So it's not unusual, and when you have to make a decision like that, it is not easy, you agonize, but whatever the decision you make, it's the one you have to live with.
Yeah, Steve, thank you. I hear you so loud and clear, and feel you so resonantly. And so I'm going to be inviting everyone to think about, therefore what? How do I take the guilt that I feel, and the shame that I feel, and the relief that I feel, and the joy that I feel back in Newton, and how do I package all that together and channel it into a productive and helpful response for me, and more importantly, for Israel? So we'll continue with that. David Phillips, you say you have a question. I'd love your question.
Hold on. Wes, you know I love you.
I feel the same way, David.
So I'm asking this question very respectfully.
Please.
My question, and then I have a comment as well. My question is, are you certain that you weren't using your children as a justification for leaving? Something that effectively part of you wanted to do anyway, and laying it on them rather than something else?
So, David, no, as I shared, it was, Tevye has three hands in his, on the one hand, on the other hand, on the third hand. So the second hand was my kids, and the third hand was, I don't want to go. And by the way, I will say, David, that when we talked to Ari, my brother-in-law in Israel, on Friday morning, I I did not mention the kids. I did not mention things. When I talked to Ree, I said, I am not comfortable going. I worry about dying, and I don't want to die from this weekend. And so I told him, so it was also the kids and it was also me. And the thing about it is, David, now I'm on the other side of it. By the way, just to state, in the end, Netanel and Lorene, even though they said they were not going, they did go, but they didn't take their kids. They left their kids with an aunt, and they did go. And here's what I would say: on the other end of this weekend, I would make the same decision again. And I love Ari so much, and we have such a hot mess of a relationship now. I have so much repair work to do. I have so much repair work to do, and I would make the same decision again, and for the same reasons. You had another question or comment?
Well, no, it's kind of a story similar to the one you heard before, which is Eliza, my daughter Eliza was in Israel, was in Jerusalem during the first Intifada. And just about every day, she would call me or I would communicate with her and she'd say, Dad, did you hear about the bombing? And the bombing that I had heard about was the one the day before, but it was a new bombing. So the first thing I said to her was obviously that if she wanted to come home, she could come home, but that I advised two things. One, to take a cab, or if she wanted to get out of Jerusalem, we have so many relatives in Israel. So the end result was she went to Ra'anana for a while until these almost daily or every other day bombings of buses in Jerusalem stopped. These decisions are extraordinarily difficult. She made the decision to stay there, and I supported that.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Thank you. I want to invite Pam Weinfeld to share. She also sent a note in the chat.
Mark has a comment.
I want to first express how grateful we are that you and Sheila are back safely. I think that I would say that echo what everyone is saying about the sense of asymmetry and difference. I've been to Israel 4 times, and I think each time that I have been there, there has been at least one and usually multiple moments where I am struck that I read about the place, I've studied about the place, I can read my Jerusalem Post weekly edition from cover to cover each week, I can listen to the Israel news 6 nights a week on YouTube, and I still don't understand it. I still don't understand what it's really like. And one of those moments was being in the Golan and hearing the bombs and seeing the smoke rising from the Syrian civil war as we're just across the border where nothing bad is going on. Or another episode was having dinner on French Hill in the apartment of the rabbi who officiated at our wedding, and having him point out the window, and you look out and you can see the security barrier snaking in this complex pattern between the Jewish and Arab neighborhoods right on top of each other, and seeing those lights and saying, those lights are Jericho, and those lights beyond it, that's Amman. I mean, and you realize that you don't understand from an American Jew, you don't really understand what it's like there. And I think that has 2 consequences for us. And I think your dramatic episode just reinforces that. The first one is that when there's something in Israel that we don't understand, or maybe it sounds like we don't like, our response should be, how can I better understand you? How, to our Israeli brothers and sisters, how can I better understand the country and what's going on there? Not to say, I don't like that. And the second is that our role should be to try to, from where we are, to support Israel as much as we can. And so I've sent my emails, and my family sent our emails this past week, and trying to do what we can to, especially at this time where we have elected representatives who are saying things that have never been said in Congress against Israel, that we have a real role. So I think the sense of asymmetry that you have has consequences for how we think about Israel, and also for our actions that we can take here.
Amen on both counts, Mark. In terms of we don't understand and we don't see the world the same way. I remember on the morning that we went to Tel Aviv, he said, great news. He's mapped it out. And he says, if you avoid this road and you take that road, and you avoid this road and you take that road, you'll avoid this Arab village, and you'll bypass that Arab village, and you'll bypass that Arab village. And he said, oh, therefore you can come. And when I heard that, I thought, oh my God, therefore I want to be not in this conversation. You know, he's talking about once you use the word bypass Arab village, then I'm thinking they're just very different from me. Because when I hear the word bypass Arab village, I think, I mean, I have no sense of direction. I need ways to go to a Shiva house in Newton. I need ways to go to a Shiva house in Brookline. And that means that if I bypass the Arab village, there's a chance that what if I don't bypass the Arab village? What if I make a mistake and I am in the wrong town and all of a sudden Shira and I are in an Arab village? Now I'm having a heart attack. And so we're very different. But on the other point that you made, Mark, is, and this is the end of this whole lesson, the point of this whole lesson, which is they're there and we're here. And the question is, what can we do for Israel from here that will be super supportive and helpful to Israel, right? We're not on the front lines. We're not in Gaza and we're not in the bomb shelters. But what can we do here in the security and safety of Newton and Greater Boston, Florida, and other places where we live that will be helpful there? And I think that's exactly the question of the hour. I think Bob Kahn wanted to share some words.
Actually, I had almost the very same thought that Mark had. I would express it only slightly differently in that our lives are so different from the lives of Israelis that before we offer our criticism, I think we have to practice extreme humility before we hold forth, because we just don't even have a glimmer of an idea of the whole risk experience that they live. My other thought was in terms of a practical matter, what can we do? I know Magen David Adom would love to hear from us. You know, they're on the front lines, treating people who are injured and so forth, and a lot of other great organizations. Back is up there on the hill every day, trying to push forward and explain what the Israelis are doing to our representatives. So I like those organizations, and there's probably other organizations other folks like as well. But I think this is the time for our voices to be heard.
Thank you, Bob. Alan Teperow, did you wish to add your voice? And if you can unmute, please, Alan.
Yes, I wrote this out, but basically I was suggesting that we've all made our choices. I have many friends who decided to make Aliyah, and they had their reasons. And I've thought dozens of times over the years that I should make Aliyah, and had my reasons, whether it was the creature comforts or wanting to contribute to the American Jewish community, lots of other reasons that I had to decide for myself, and often with anguish and sometimes with shame, that I was going to remain in the United States. And of course, because of my family, I wanted to be close to kids, now grandkids. So these are friends with whom I've known for many years. I don't have too many relatives there, but people who have all contributed in many ways as rabbis and educators in the Israeli Jewish community, and we've decided to stay here. We talk about it often, but these are choices that we've had to make.
Thank you, Alan. Hi, Kempler.
Wes, I want to say I'm full of admiration to you for taking these risks and sharing with us some of your innermost feelings. I was thinking about you actually when you were still in Israel, and wondering when you plan to return, and probably the conflict that must be going on as you were thinking about being with your family at a critical time and wanting to be back here with your congregation, with us. But I remember an incident several years ago when our daughter was in Israel. I don't know whether it's junior year abroad, and she we were getting off the plane and she was there to greet us. And she said, Mom and Dad, I'm going to make Aliyah. And my heart suddenly sank. Suddenly sank. How can I deal with this loss potentially of our daughter going, and we wouldn't see her, and the risks that she would be taking? Well, that's a minor issue, but in terms of your situation, I felt like it's not a shame to admit that you are concerned with self-preservation. That's a basic human instinct, and we all have that. But at the same time, we also have loyalties. We have loyalties to our family and loyalties to our country. And you, of all people, have been putting forth to all of us for so many years the love of Israel. But as Alan said, we made a choice when we're still here, and Ben Gurion was inviting us to come to Israel and make Aliyah, but we decided otherwise. And that comes with a certain amount of guilt, when especially at a time like this, when people are on the line, their lives are on the line. Yes, we can't be there with them, and we can't take the risks. And that's a source of shame, perhaps, and guilt. But we have to come to terms with our limits, that we've made certain choices, and that goes with certain choices that will continue to haunt us or not, or be with us the rest of our lives. But I'm glad you're here and safe, and Sheila and I love you.
I'd like to make a comment. My sister's granddaughter just gave birth to twins in Israel, and my sister and her husband have not been able to go to a number of events. And her granddaughter, who gave birth, could not do it in the hospital because it was being bombed. And she did it in a hallway. She had twin kids, 12 pounds. And so people all over are making those agreements with guilt and sorrow that they can't see grandkids. In her case, my baby sister now has grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Yes, so yes, a lot of people share your story.
Well, hi, and Sheila, thank Mazel Tov and your family's next generation. Thank you. I want to just call on a few last people, 3 last people, and then we'll close. I want to close with a spiritual challenge to all of us who are feeling this asymmetry, especially now. The next person I'd like to call on is our beloved Janet Chiel.
Okay, I unmuted.
Yeah.
I just want to say that, Wes, you express, and you love Israel, b'leiva nefesh. That is a given. And we have to think about pikuach nefesh. Your life is very, as everyone in Israel's life is, but giving your life is not going to help Israel. However, if you come here and you talk about Israel and encourage people to support Israel, you are doing much more than giving your life. And of what good is it? Of what use? Your use is to talk about Israel to all the people here, because there are some people who don't appreciate Israel. And of course, all of us who are not in Israel have a feeling of guilt, but that doesn't mean that you should endanger your life. I don't see that that accomplishes anything. You have so much to give and to help all of us understand why Israel is so important. And we should all support Israel, as was Mr. I forget his first name, said we should support the Red the ambulance service. There's
Right.
so many things that we can do. And being here, we can do it. Being dead, you can't do it.
Well, Janet, thank you. Thank you, my dear friend. Thank you. We're two last comments and then I'll close. And Sebestyen would like to say something.
I can only wholeheartedly agree with Mrs. Chiel. She's absolutely correct. I'm reminded, I do find it challenging, but Micha Goodman last summer gave the talk about the duality of Jews, the Jews in Israel, the Jews here. And I think possibly the one thing that didn't get mentioned because we weren't in a war is that Israelis live with this every day and we don't. And so it's neither a good nor a bad. It's different. And to be here, we can fight the war outside of Israel, the war of all the countries condemning Israel.
Right. Thank you, Anne.
And also, Wes, just as a kid, my parents once went off itinerary on a trip and didn't tell us. For 5 days, we had no clue where they were. And you did the right thing.
And thank you. Maxine Zarchan, you'll be our last speaker and then I'll close. Maxine? Okay, I guess we might have lost Maxine.
Okay, I did.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was going to say I'm very emotional about this, and I will try to make it as concise as possible because I feel for you. I've been in that situation. It was in 1973 that Paul and I we were living in Israel at that time. Paul was working for the Ministry of Defense. My son was born. I had a 4-year-old daughter with me, and we were living in Haifa, and war broke out, the Yom Kippur War. And things, as you know, were very, very bad. We didn't know how bad they were until years later, frankly, but it was bad. I was running to the bomb shelter with my baby and with my daughter. Paul had to be at work at the Ministry of Defense. He was working for Raphael. At night, he'd go to guard it, etc. But the worst thing for me was the thought of what was I going to do? Because as things got worse, there were rumors that the American government was going to send in planes to evacuate Americans. And deep in my heart, I knew I could not leave because what was giving me permission to leave? An American passport? Because I was lucky enough to have an American passport. But then my heart was saying, but I have these 2 children and I have this responsibility. It's not just my decision anymore. It's these 2 children. What am I going to do? And what I wanted us to say at the beginning, I have to step back for a minute, is the asymmetry that you talk about between Israeli Jews and American Jews. For me, I've always had between some American Jews also, because of the fact that unless you have lived there through these situations, you don't understand what it is like. And for years to listen to the quandaries that, as you was talking about last night a bit, about what the left has said, even though my principles are left in many ways, when it comes to Israel, I feel very differently. And the asymmetry that I'm referring to between myself here and other American Jews is that, for me, President Nixon was a hero because he saved me from having to make that decision about whether I was going to stay in Israel or leave my neighbors and people I care deeply about and my fellow Jews only because I had an American passport, because he was strong enough to redefend, to rearm Israel that allowed it to continue and win the war. So what I want to say to you, I'm sorry I'm so emotional, is that I totally understand how you feel, but I want to say to you with my heart that last night I heard you speak and I could not believe it. I was just blown away by how you spoke last night, Wes. Because in all the years that you have spoken about Israel, and I know you love Israel, There has always been the other side. You've always been, very willing, obviously, to see both sides as I have, but there were times where I felt you stepped over the line, like with Ari Shavit. And now when I heard you speak last night, I thought, oh my gosh, he got it. He knows now what it's like to feel this way and what it's like to be there and live there. And I felt, and what I want to say to you is that you did the right thing, because first of all, you were there for the time that I'm glad you were there for, because you see things differently. And second of all, you have a gift. You have an extraordinary gift of oratory. And if you continue to speak to not just Jews, but to the non-Jews of our country and the world, the way you spoke last night, then that is the reason why you came back. And that is what is needed at this time. We have to stop being polite, and we have to start saying what has to be said. And of course, it's complicated, but whatever. So thank you, Wes.
Thank you, Maxine. So, and thank you all. I wanna first of all thank everyone for this really thoughtful and supportive and empathetic conversation. And I want to leave everybody leaving this class very unsettled and very ruffled. Very unsettled and very ruffled. I want to give everyone spiritual homework, and then I'm going to tell you how I'm going to try my best to fulfill the spiritual homework. Here's the spiritual homework. So the good news is you can take a walk around the block, or to the carriage strip, or to around the reservoir, wherever you want, without worrying about bombs. And the bad news is that that comes with guilt and shame if you're deeply connected to our brothers and sisters in Israel who cannot do so. That's just, as so many of you have spoken, that's just the lay of the land. That's just the reality. Therefore, what follows? Therefore, the question that follows is, what can I do uniquely here that I couldn't even do there that will be really helpful to Israel? That's the unsettling question. What can I do here that I could not even do there that will really help Israel? So I'll tell you what I'm thinking about doing. I don't yet have my wife's blessing. When I asked her last night, she always says to me, I'm often wrong, never in doubt. And that's her way of telling me to, calm down. But this is what I think I would like to do. I was so upset by the letter that rabbinical students wrote. And I thought, how could you possibly write that letter? I told Michelle, when I read that letter, I said to Michelle, if I die in a heart attack or car accident and you need to hire another rabbi, promise me that you will not hire a rabbi who signed that letter. Promise me that Temple Emmanuel will never hire a rabbi that signed that letter, because how could you be a rabbi where you don't see Jewish pain and where you don't see Jewish lives that are at risk every day? I applaud the fact, I affirm the fact that they see Palestinians who are suffering. That is very important, to see Palestinians who are caught up in this crossfire. I celebrate the fact that they do, but how do they not see Jews' rights to defend themselves? And what would you do if the missiles were being lobbed on you and on your loved ones? And how could they therefore be a rabbi in Israel given that? So here's what I think I want to do. I'm going to reach out to Sharon Cohn-Anisfeld, and I'm going to reach out to these rabbinical students, and I want to be in dialogue with them. And the reason I do is I'd like to understand their point of view. And here's the really concerning news. That point of view, which is so appalling to me, and is so appalling to so many of you on this call, is tragically where so many of our children and grandchildren are. There are a lot of Jews who feel that way. Not to mention, there's a lot of non-Jews who really feel that way. And not only in Europe, where they have loved our dying for years and have been very okay with dead Jews for years, and in Europe is very not okay with Jews who defend themselves, as I shared last night. But in America, when you think about, Bob Kahn and others mentioned what has been said, Mark Weinfeld has mentioned what has been said in the halls of Congress that didn't used to get said, and the kind of pressure that's brought to bear. A lot of that comes from the worldview that these rabbinical students somehow are channeling. And more to the point, it's our children and grandchildren who somehow, for reasons I really don't understand, all too many of them are drawn to this. I got many emails from family members, from people who are the age of the people on this screen, saying, my child, my grandchild is hostile to Israel now. So what I want to do is try to understand, I want to try to be in dialogue with these rabbinical students so that they can at least see it from another point of view. I can already tell you how the class is going to begin. I'm going to show them the Twitter that's from IDF, which shows a bomb, a missile destroying a house in Cholon, and then asking, what would you do? A, do nothing. B, defend yourself and fellow citizens. What would you do? I want to start by asking them to address that. And then I want to try to understand them so that I can address that, to me, cancer that's in the body politic, and that cancer that is in the Jewish body politic, particularly of the rising generations. So here is your homework. Your homework is, what can I do here right now that is going to help our beloved Eretz Yisrael right now? And I hope that unsettles you, because there's not an easy answer, but I think that is the question of this moment. So lots of love and a Chag Sameach, and we will see you tonight and tomorrow. Chag Sameach. Bye.